I think that we cannot take the infrastructure situation lightly.
Ooh.
You remember what happened in Minnesota?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic example.
And you know, it's been going on for a while. When I first started in politics over 40 years ago, I filmed an interview under what was then the Clark Avenue Bridge. And the cameraman was above the deck of the bridge, and he was filming the interview through a hole in the deck of the bridge. Okay? Then when the camera pulled up, they saw it was a hole in the bridge. All over America, you have bridges that are in serious trouble. Now, you only hear about it when one of them goes down. We shouldn't wait till somebody gets hurt. And we cannot wait. That's why I'm hopeful that President Obama is going to move forward to make some major investments beyond the $100 billion. We're going to need to make trillions of dollars in investments. Now, what will that do? We'll put millions of people back to work. Think about that. I mean, it'll prime the pump of the economy. You know, some people feel that the way you get the economy moving is to give money to Wall Street. Well, I have a different view. I think the way you get the economy moving is to get that money to Main Street, get it into people's hands, give them jobs, health care, education, housing. People spend the money into circulation. You make things happen. That, to me, is how you get the economy moving again. And I'll tell you, I think sooner or later we're going to have to do, in each of those areas, major economic movement and action.
You mentioned early on about contracting, you know, and the fact that minorities, you know, you want to make certain that they have an opportunity to come into the mainstream and be able to get some of these contracts. Now, I know that the President of the United States has been working on, you know, reviewing the way contracts are let. I mean, he's talked about it in these no-bid contracts. And how can we sort of range for minorities or small businesses to be able to get some of these contracts? Well,
let me tell you about my experience in this. Now, I was elected mayor of Cleveland in 1977, 32 years ago. I was elected with the help of Carl Stokes and Louis Stokes. Louis Stokes was then the congressman from the 11th Congressional District. And
great man.
Great man.
Yes.
And Carl Stokes, his brother, was the first African-American elected mayor of a major city in Cleveland, Ohio in 1967. The Stokes operation and the 11th District Caucus both helped me become mayor of Cleveland. They helped me get elected. So when I got elected mayor, what did I do? I went to the black community and I said, look, we're going to share and share alike. Half of the top cabinet positions go to the black community. Top appointments go to the black community. And a half of the contracts are going to go to the black community. Now, to me, this is the way it's got to be. If that's the way you got elected, that's the way it should go. This is politics now. You know, I'm a politician.
And a good one.
Well, you know what, though? But I just felt it's politics. You got to remember who brought you to the dance. So what we did, and this was on the up and up, and all the work that was done was right, but we made sure that any contractors from the black community who wanted a hearing and a chance at a contract, that they had a chance to do that. And anyone who came in there with a contract representing, let's say, a white contractor, majority contractor, they understood that we wanted to make sure that there were men and women who happened to be of African American descent who were part of the deal. Now, let me be more specific. My safety director was an African American. This is a person that had jurisdiction over police and fire, and this is back in 1977. And he was an assistant safety director under Carl Stokes. The person that ran my personnel was all personnel for the city of Cleveland, or 10,000 employees then, an African American. Human resource and economic development, an African American. The person who was in charge of the community relations, African American. I mean, I made sure that our top positions were shared with the community. And to me, this is a practical way of governing. So I'm hopeful that our new administration will understand that there is a political side of this that you can't ignore. And you know what? It goes beyond it. It's about justice. It's about simply the right thing to do. You know, if the major problem in this country is the maldistribution of wealth, then one way in which government can serve to address that issue is to make certain that when government has a chance to distribute wealth through contracts, that people who are traditionally cut out of the big contracts are given a chance to get a piece of the action.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Let me ask you this, the TARP money. I want to switch just a moment for TARP money. You know, people felt that just getting this money out to the banks in particular, that they would then start making loans and things would begin to sort of open up. I'm hearing all kinds of things. Let me just say, I was at a meeting just recently, and they said some gentleman wanted to speak with me, and his name was Gephardt, they said. And I said, Gephardt? And then, of course, I said, Dick Gephardt, that was our leader, and the majority leader and then the minority leader and all that. I says, and so he said, yeah, he wants to speak with you. So, of course, he comes in the back and where I am, and he said to me, he says, Ed, he says, the auto industry, something has to be done. And I said to him, what are you talking about? He says, well, I went to lease a car, and they said to me I couldn't lease it. He says, and then I asked the guy, how am I going to get a car? And Dick said to me, he says, that the man said, you got to buy it. And so he said, okay, I'll go buy it. He said, well, then how much I have to put down? The man said he had to put down 50% to buy a car. Now, who can afford to put down 50% just to buy a car? And then, of course, before I realized, I said to Dick, your credit must be messed up. And he said, oh, no. He said, that's what we're dealing with today, and it must be fixed, Ed. It has to be fixed.
Well, there is, we've given out now through the Treasury and through the Fed trillions of dollars to America's financial institutions, and still we have a freeze for many people on consumer credit, purchases of cars and other things. But we also have a freeze on people being able to get credit to be able to save their home. We do not have the kind of effective moratorium on foreclosures that will save the millions of people who are faced with foreclosures. Banks, get this, we gave the money to the banks so the banks would loosen up on their credit and help keep people in their homes. Well, that's not happening. How can the banks get all this money and we still have so many people facing foreclosure? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we should have been, Congress wanted loan modification. We didn't get it. We need to insist, we need to go back and insist on loan modification. What does that mean? That means helping to keep people in their homes by extending the terms of the payment, by lowering the interest rate, okay, and lowering the premiums. Now, we're giving trillions of dollars to banks, okay, and people are still losing their homes. There's a disconnect here, because since the epicenter of this whole thing was a subprime loan, where these banks went into primarily minority communities and sold these loans to people who no documentation, low documentation, people just desperate to own a home. And the banks are saying, don't worry about whether you can pay right away. Don't worry about what it's going to cost to finance. Just sign here on the dotted line, okay? They just wanted to book the loan so that they could put these loans into collections of loans and sell them as securities. So they could move up the stock of the bank. That's all they cared about. They didn't care about whether people could pay. So finally, when people couldn't pay, the whole scam starts to break down and people are out of their homes, okay? This was a misrepresentation to millions of Americans, and the banks are being rewarded, as far as I'm concerned, for it, which is why I voted against this TARP. I didn't like the way it was set up to begin with. We need to move back and keep people in their homes. This is something that I think is so critical. Loan modification. Get the help to the people that need it. And frankly, if banks made the wrong choices, they made the wrong loans, then they ought to go down. And it's time that we started to get the money back to people instead of bailing out Wall Street. So, this game is still in process. And we're going to be hearing a lot about this. I'll tell you, in Cleveland, where I'm from, our domestic policy subcommittee did research, and you could look at the map of where the subprime loans were going. Where do you suppose they were going?
Minority community?
They were going heaviest in the black community. Now, people were absolutely taking advantage of a situation of what? The Community Reinvestment Act, never enforced, okay? So that meant that people in the black community in the Cleveland area were starved for a chance to own a home, okay? Because they couldn't get a prime loan. So the banks came up with these subprime loans, which means we're going to give you a rate that it seems like a good rate, and we'll give you terms that you don't have to worry about. But the people didn't understand what they were getting themselves into, and somebody says, well, that's their problem. No, it's not society's problem, because everything collapsed then. But they targeted people based on the fact that they didn't know exactly what they were getting into. And in the African American community, home ownership, just like anywhere else, is a huge thing. But the banks knew that the desperation that was there, people would sign up for any opportunity to own a home, whether they could make the payment in a couple months or not. And they didn't care. This, to me, This is a major civil rights calamity in our country, and these bankers were criminals, and they had to go to jail for what they did.